Good evening and welcome to the Marion Minor Cook Athenaeum. My name is Sophia Cravazzi and I'm one of your Athenaeum Fellows this year. It's safe to say the pace at which technology is evolving is incredible. There's no telling what the world would look like as the decades go by, and the exponential advancement of technology is a true testament to the capabilities of human minds and intellect. But what about technological minds, such as artificial intelligence? In recent years, AI technology has made its way into numerous aspects of human life. In the medical sphere, we're seeing robot-assisted surgeries, AI diagnostic programs, and apps that are aiding with drug discovery. In finance, we are seeing AI portfolio managers and trend predictors. In travel, we have virtual travel assistants and transportation aids such as Google Maps. The list goes on and on. But what about policing, law, and the justice system? Can artificial intelligence dispense real justice? This evening, we are lucky to have Katherine Forrest, parent of someone in class of 22, a lawyer, former U.S. District Judge, and technology writer here to help us think deeper about the tough questions surrounding AI in this specific realm of society. Today, AI is used in policing, criminal investigations, by judges in sentencing, and in targeting terrorists. But what are the inherent risks and potential benefits of delegating justice to machines? What theory of justice are we teaching the machines to use? And who, if anyone, has chosen that theory? Forrest explores these complex issues and urges a national conversation on AI, justice, and liberty. She's a partner at Cravath Litigation Department and most recently served as a U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of New York. She was also the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Over the course of her career, Forrest has been regarded as a leader in legal issues relating to technology, including the digital environment, big data, and artificial intelligence. She regularly speaks on these topics and has a forthcoming book on artificial intelligence and justice issues. Forrest is a regular technology columnist for the New York Law Journal and recently authored a chapter on emerging issues in copyright law and artificial intelligence in the Law of Artificial Intelligence and Smart Machines. Forrest received a BA with honors from Wesleyan University and a JD from NYU School of Law, where she co-teaches a course on quantitative methods and the law. She's the featured speaker of CMC's 2020 Family Weekend, so a big welcome to all of our families in attendance this evening. And now, per usual, I must remind you that audio and visual recording is strictly prohibited, so please take this time to silence and put away your mobile devices. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ms. Forrest to the Athenaeum.
Thank you, everyone, and it is terrific to be here. I'll tell you that my daughter's name is Jane Baldwin, and so that she can't escape the fact that she doesn't have the same last name. I'm going to make sure that she's going to hear about this all tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to, she's actually at basketball practice right now, so she's not going to make it for the beginning. We're going to talk about exactly what is up here on the screen tonight, and I'm going to go through a number of slides really very quickly, and hope that I thread the needle between a number of you who I've spoken to before the talk who know an awful lot about AI, and some people who confess that they really don't, but they're interested in the topic and they hear AI being thrown around a lot and they want to sort of learn more about it. So I'm going to try to thread that needle. What I want to do is I want to, with this talk, really answer a question that I myself am going to raise that you may not even have raised for yourselves, which is, what are the decision-making ways in which AI is looking at ethics and values in its decisions? What are the ways in which ethical and value-based systems are finding their ways into AI decisions? Right now, today, deployed in a variety of places in this country, are all kinds of software that are AI software. It's AI. AI is software that are making predictive decisions that are liberty-based and that have value systems embedded in them and ethical systems embedded in them. And I want to show you that, number one, that is happening. It's actually happening. It's happening today. It's happening all around us. And I want to talk to you about why it's happening and why we have to have a national conversation now about what kind of value system, what kind of ethical framework we want AI to learn. So AI use is growing exponentially. The tools today are being used by judges all over this country. I do talks in the summertime to a bunch of judges, all of the judges in New York State, about AI. It's being used as a primary tool in bail decision making and sentencing determinations today. This is not a tomorrow issue, it's a today issue. And when AI is engaged in these activities, it is often relying on one or more embedded systems of value systems and ethical frameworks. They are there. We don't think of the AI tools as having value systems or ethical frameworks. We think of it somehow as just having right or wrong answers. But there are value systems and there are ethical frameworks in there. So we've been so focused in this country on the technical capabilities of AI that, in my view, we have given insufficient attention to how that AI is making decisions that have value systems in them and ethical frameworks. And we're not asking whose they are, who came up with them, how they got there, whether we all agree with them. Do we all think that everybody in this room shares the same values? We would weight everything the same way? That our ethical systems are exactly the same? Maybe on some things, maybe not on others. Well, I'll tell you that there are AI decision-making systems right now that are deployed in a monolithic way, that are not taking into account all of your individual value systems or ethical frameworks. But those decisions are being made today. So we're going to look at tonight, how does AI use these value systems and ethical frameworks? What are they? Where does it get them from? Are they ours or are they someone else's? Do we even share them? And by the way, is there a normative value system, a normative ethical system, one right system that we would teach AI if we could teach AI? And could we ever agree on what it was? All right, so we're going to go through our structure. We've got eight pieces. It's actually, some of them go faster than others. Why we care. Let's just talk about that for a minute in a moment. The decision making by humans and by AI. I want to walk us through how decisions are made. This should be very basic. You make decisions every day, but we'll go through it. We're going to use judicial decision making as an example because it is one clear place where AI is embedding value frameworks and value systems and ethical frameworks every single day in its current utilization. We're going to look at how AI decides, a very short primer on the how, on the AI technology, locating concepts of justice within an AI tool, using liberty determinations as an example of this so that you can actually see it in practice. And that's bail. I'm going to use bail and sentencing decisions, two that I'm very familiar with, having done 8 gazillion bail determinations and 8.5 gazillion sentencing determinations. I'm also going to look at how one argument is, well, the designer did it. The designer put it in there. Utilitarianism and legal positivism as two possible outcomes of design-based AI. And ultimately looking at AI as the potential to act as an executioner. And there could be no bigger, I think, way in which justice frameworks, ethical frameworks come into play. All right, let's just move on. Why we care? Why do we care? Well, AI is making decisions for us every single day. And when AI's decisions involve value judgments and ethical frameworks that we don't share, then we may view them ultimately as inherently unfair, and that is going to potentially, down the road, lead to a sense of societal unfairness and a belief in an undemocratic process. You can ask yourself, do you want decisions made for you that you deem unethical? The answer, I would assume, is no, right? That's not the way we work. Do you want decisions made for you based on value systems that not only you don't share, but that you also believe are antithetical to the way that you want to live your life? Would you agree to conduct yourself as a machine tells you to if you don't agree with the value system or the ethical framework that they have based their decision on? And if the decisions that machines are going to make for us are only going to increase in number, don't we need to understand whether we trust them to make those decisions according to the values and the ethics that we share. Have I gotten your attention yet? Maybe, maybe not. I'll continue working on it. Okay. All right. So in use today. All right. We've got AI tools that are in use today. This is not a theoretical point. This is not just a point for some academic discussion that we could have. AI is used today to make significant life decisions, liberty decisions, and death decisions. This is not tomorrow. This is not science fiction. This is not just to get an audience who's interested in sort of the hot topic. This is true today. AI tools are used today to make decisions about bail. They're used to assist judges with making sentencing determinations, to making evidentiary decisions. There are virtual and holographic judges. Those have been deployed in China. They've got 160 of them in China right now that are actually hearing cases from beginning to end and rendering verdicts. Also, Estonia has said that they are following suit. The rest of them are in the United States. The virtual and holographic judges are outside of the United States. But AI tools also act as jurors today. They act as fact finders. We're seeing AI applying community standards, whatever that community is, in terms of determining whether an employee will be likely to be successful or unsuccessful when they are reviewing applications, because that happens all the time in the HR area in many companies. Whether or not somebody is deserving or undeserving when they apply for various kinds of governmental benefits. And AI tools today also allow and are enabled to act as an ultimate executioner to identify the location, the identity, and the event prediction, which is enormously important for certain kinds of bad actors to target them and to execute, sometimes without knowing fully the identity. All right, so these are real questions that we face today. All right, so let's talk about decision making by humans and AI, value systems, and frameworks. We humans are AI's birth parents. We are its progenitors. AI doesn't exist without us. It exists because of us, and it exists from what is inside of us. And what's inside of us is what's inside of the individuals who are the programmers first, right, who are working on designing these tools in a variety of different places, not just the coders, but the people who are working with the coders. And we know that one of the primary purposes of AI is to enable it to make decisions that replicate human decision making. That's what we're trying to get AI to do. That's our purpose. So we are trying to make AI be able to replicate human decision making, and human decision making involves our application of our value systems, our application of our ethical frameworks. Why do we think AI decision making is somehow going to be pure of value systems, pure of ethical frameworks? So let's look closely at human decisions to understand what it is we're asking AI to do. Now, there are several kinds of decision making, and I could do a whole lecture on decision making, but we're going to talk about two. One is non-discretionary. People think AI does basically non-discretionary decision making. It just tells you sort of right and wrong. Facial recognition would be a prime example of this. You give AI enough pictures of cats and puppies, and it's going to recognize whether something is a cat or a puppy, and it probably does not have to rely upon any ethical framework or value system to tell you whether something's a cat or a puppy. Cute or not cute is a different question, but the fact of a cat or a puppy is different, okay? So non-discretionary, perfect information, I'm not really talking about that so much, okay? So if you start in your mind going back to facial recognition technology, voice recognition technology, mapping technology, where perfect information can be used, that is not so much what I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about discretionary decision making, which we're asking AI to do every day, where there's a subjective component, an adding judgment element, an adding judgment of the unknown, where we ask AI to do what humans do, which is to weigh information. That's what we ask humans to do when we're making bail determinations, when we're making sentencing decisions, when we're actually engaging in liberty decisions. All right, decision making, let's look at it very generally. We make gazillions of decisions every day. We make big decisions, we make small, but we also make good decisions and bad ones. Why do we think that AI is only ever going to make a good decision? right? Why do people wander around thinking it's only going to do the right thing, right? Whose definition of right are we talking about? And are we sure that it's been fully debugged, all right? So you want to be sure that AI, that you ask the question, is it able to make good decisions? Reasonable ones, rational ones, ethical ones. Let's think about the assumption, how dangerous the assumption is that AI is only going to make good decisions. Now, human decision making, we know, is a process, right? We apply logic, we apply reason, but we also are products of our environment, and we apply whatever biases, good or bad, we have inside of us to our information and data to make a decision. So if you're making a decision based upon bias in one direction or the other, that's part of your decision making. Why do we think AI does not have bias? We're going to talk about how it does in just a moment. We make decisions all the time about whether to lie, tell the truth, cheat, steal, be faithful, unfaithful, help families, friends. We're going to look in a moment at deciding whether or not to deprive someone of his or her liberty, a quintessential decision that requires subjective judgment that a human makes today, that we are transferring part of that to AI, whether or not that kind of human decision is one that we're able to locate the value system and ethical framework within. Let's talk about the origin story of human frameworks, ethical frameworks, and value systems. Okay, we make good decisions because you have good values. But there's no single, right? There's no single good value system. There's no good single ethical framework. There's as many as there are in this room. You may believe that yours is the right one, but your neighbor may disagree on small things, on big things. You don't necessarily even know until you really dig into it. Where do you learn your value system from? Well, you learn it from all of the people who taught it to you, anybody who you came into contact with. It's a continuous, iterative process. AI learns in a continuous, iterative way. It's also tied strongly, our value systems and ethical frameworks, to social context. Do we assume that all of AI shares the same framework? Well, where in the world did they get that from? And is that AI of our society? Do you know where the AI was developed and who was developing it and what society they were in, whether they shared our framework or someone else's? Is it my society? Is it your society? Does it matter? American society, we know, is based on a variety of cultural traditions. Judeo, Christian, multicultural. AI does not come to the table with any predisposition towards any particular cultural system. You've got to teach it based upon data sets, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It's also cultural relativism, right? There's cultures all over this world that are different. And the political system matters too. Is the AI from an area that values democracy or instead values autocracy? How does that affect the decision making? All right, so let's define the value systems and ethical frameworks that we're going to be talking about with AI. Value systems and ethical frameworks are really all about prioritizing what you think is important, what you think is right, and how you weigh that. Your subjective exercise in weighing that. What do you value? Do you value family first? Is it maybe really second? Is it work career first? Is it money? Is it your personal happiness? Is it someone else's happiness? Is it social status? Is it public recognition? What is it that you value most, okay? How do you prioritize this? And by the way, do you think that your value is the same as the person next to you? We've talked about that, and we will again and again. Same thing with ethical frameworks. How you distinguish good and bad may be different from somebody else's distinguishing it. One thing we know is that human frameworks change. And how are we going to get AI's ethical frameworks to change? We need them to be mutable, not immutable. We need them to change. We need them to be mutable, to change with historical times, just like ours do. Okay? The AI designed in one region, could it actually go elsewhere and be as applicable? How about AI designed in one period of time? Could it actually go elsewhere and be as applicable? Could you use AI designed 5 years ago when cannabis was a crime throughout the country? Could you still use that in Colorado if you had a data set that was based in Colorado from 10 years ago in Colorado today? Probably not with the results that would actually be necessarily accurate. You might be able to use it in New York, but are the Colorado values the same in other areas, apart from the fact that cannabis is no longer a crime there, but is still in New York? These are all questions. How do we know and ensure that AI's frameworks are able to change and appropriate to the time and to the place? So here's questions for you to ponder. What if the AI framework that we use for liberty determinations is the last one we ever need or get to choose because we reach a point, we talked about this with Will earlier at dinner, at a point of singularity, when AI intelligence exceeds ours, we're going to stop having humans actually design this stuff. It's going to start iteratively designing itself. So if we don't teach it now, we're not going to teach it then. Shouldn't we choose it carefully with open eyes? So let's use decision making as an example, because this is a good place to look at how we can actually see AI's ethical frameworks at work. But first, I may need to do a little more work to convince you that AI does make these kinds of decisions based upon values and ethical frameworks. I've had actually at a conference I was at recently somebody say, AI doesn't really make decisions, it just spits out predictive output. I said, no. AI makes a decision when its predictive output is presented to a judge and the judge says, oh, 3 years, 3 years. That's a decision, okay? It may be predictive output, but it's become a decision. And so it certainly does make decisions. Now I'm going to ask, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to sort of walk with me as we go through comparing the decisions that we humans make now and that we are currently asking AI to do in the criminal justice area. And if I convince you that we humans are actually embedding subjectivity into our decision making, I want to ask you how you think it can be that AI doing the same analysis is not. And we'll talk about ways in which I believe technologically that it does. All right, moving right along. One thing I want to say is that judges are human too. I can promise you that, having been one for a number of years. We come to the table all over this country with our own personal value systems and frameworks, and we're all different. We learned from the same people that you all learned from, our parents, our teachers, our role models, our friends, our family, and we're chosen as representatives of a community, but the community is extremely diverse. It's not a monolithic community. I was a judge in New York City. I certainly did not purport to represent all of the values in New York City. We have incredible differentials in background where there's no consistency in our value systems. Some of us come with older sets of value systems, younger sets of value systems. Some are coming with more conservative, more liberal, Republican, Democrat. Different things vary by region, north, south, east, west. Some are flexible. Some people are flexible decision makers, flexible with their value systems. Some are not. Some are egotistical. Their value systems are very much centered around themselves. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, when I became a judge, nobody said to me, by the way, what's your value system? Okay, this is not a question that's asked. I was asked a number of questions, but I was not asked what values I held or what conduct I deemed ethical or unethical. They based their decisions on other things. So we've got changing notions of right and wrong that are also impacting the judge's decision making. And this also will feed into how we're going to get AI to understand this. Right now, we have disagreements about what should be criminalized. That's actually been true for a very long time. We have differing views by different judges in different places at the same time, about how serious a particular offense is, about whether or not the conduct is really that egregious or not. I might take a very strong, hard view of drug crimes. I did. I was a law and order girl kind of judge. All right? I took a very harsh view on drug crimes. I know a lot of people who did not. That was what I came to the table with. So you've got judges coming to the table with their different views. But the views of seriousness and the nature of the conduct, they change. And they're complicated by differing and changing over time notions of right or wrong. Think about prohibition. Think about race-based laws. Think about the fact that they used to stone people for infidelity, and by the way, in some parts of the world they still do. Think about the fact that they outlawed same-sex relationship. Think about the fact that until a few years ago, and still in many parts of the country, they arrest people for prostitution and solicitation. And in some parts of the country, it's legal. And with controlled substances, in the 30s, cocaine was legal. Now it's obviously very much not. Cannabis in some parts of the country is legal, and in other parts of the country is still not. And federally, it's still not at all. And these laws don't change at one time. They change over time. And our view as to the seriousness of certain kinds of conduct don't change overnight. They change over time. So we have to think about, we can't just program AI with right and wrong, binary, on-off switch. It's a spectrum of time that we've got to take into consideration. So let's just talk about how AI decides. I'll look at my time, I'm okay. Okay, how does AI decide? Well, first of all, we know that it's engaging in all kinds of decision making. Why is AI even around now? Why are we hearing about it so much now? Two things: increases in computational power and increases in the availability of large data sets. Because the way we all learned was by being exposed, walking around the world as small children, to whatever we saw around us. That was our data set. Our data set wasn't sort of a little data set in books. It was a data set that was everything, every data point of what was around us. AI learns with data sets. The ability of AI today to have access to enormous data sets is one of the big reasons why we're seeing such an explosion in AI right now. But AI is also, it's not just robots, by the way. It's software, but it's not necessarily in one place, okay? It's largely distributed, which means AI, when you think of AI, it can be in, the same AI can be in multiple places at one time. That actually leads to some very complicated results I won't go into right now. There's narrow AI, which does sort of one thing, and general AI, which does a whole bunch of things. Now, how do we define AI? We define AI as machines that learn, that go beyond what the human taught them, that do more than we put in. So there are, as I say to people in audiences when I talk about this, the difference between AI and just high-tech software is machines that learn, that actually learn something, versus machines with learning, that only come to the table and can do what you've taught them to do and no more. AI will learn. It will go beyond. And so a key goal of AI is to actually mimic the flexibility of human decision making. All right, so now we're going to go into a little bit of AI in terms of how it works. It's basically algorithms. What I really want you to get from this is that AI is just patterns, right? It's an algorithm. It's set up like a small math problem to a huge math problem. And what it really means is that you've got inputs and outputs. And we're going to talk about this more in a moment. But there are algorithms that are so complicated right now, they call it black box AI. The algorithm that they started with, the human algorithm that was originally designed, has gotten so complicated that it actually now no longer can be completely deciphered by human beings. They don't quite know how it works anymore. Okay? And that is happening today. That's not a tomorrow thing. That's a today thing. Different algorithms, there's not just one algorithm, have different objectives. The facial recognition algorithm is a little bit different from the kind that I'm talking about now, with the predictions of violence, predictions of recidivism, that kind of thing. Each step in the algorithm corresponds with what I'm going to call an input. That word input is very important because it's an instance of human decision making in part, or adjustment, because the AI also comes up with its own inputs. The AI's objective, what it's trying to do, a bail determination, a sentencing decision, predicting recidivism, predicting violence, is its output. Okay, the output are its decisions. All right, now, there is, with inputs and weightings, these are instances of human decision making. There is no golden tablet. There is no place that is written down what all the magical correct inputs are. They are designed either by humans or by machines. They can be designed by the human. All the inputs can be chosen. I just ask you to think about who's deciding what the inputs are on a liberty determination, okay? And what is the basis for that decision? There is no golden tablet where they're all written down, okay? Or AI can actually come up with its inputs through pattern recognition, but they can be adjusted and are often adjusted by humans. And what human is doing the adjustment? On what basis is the adjustment being made? Same thing for weighting. You've got an input that's going into a decision, and you need to weight that input, okay? And that input for the weighting, there are two methods. The human can intervene, or the weighting can be derived just by the AI. So what is the human doing if it's adjusting that weighting, and how are they deciding to adjust that weighting? We're going to talk about this in a moment in terms of the fact that a bail decision might be based upon the characteristics of a particular defendant. The inputs are race, age, marital status, mental health history, prior arrest history, residency, stability of home life, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the inputs. The output is, are they likely to be violent? That's the output. That's what I'm talking about. Who comes up with those inputs? Race. Should race be an input? Who decides? Who decides on the weighting of that input? Should the weighting of that input of race be 97%? Should it be 2%? Should it be eliminated altogether? Who is making these determinations? And so you need to be asking these things, in my view. Now, AI learns with data sets. The way that AI learns is you've got this algorithm, and then you set it loose on a data set, and you say, go learn, AI. Go learn all you can from this data set. There is no golden tablet of a data set. There is no correct data set. There is no master data set that we can ensure is the right data set, is the data set we should be using. That does not exist. Data sets is just data, right? It's just data. So who's going to select the data? What's the time period for the data? What about the regional variation? Do you want the northern data set to be applied to the south? Should the eastern be applied to the west? Should Europe's be applied to America? Should India's be applied to China? Who's deciding all of this? And by the way, it's comprised, data sets are comprised of individual data points, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. So the data set is used to teach the AI. But the data set, and this is a critical point, I've got a few critical points here. One of them is the data set is the aggregation of data points. I'm going to come back to this because data points means every data set, let's just say that you're going to use arrest history to help inform you of a bail determination. Is this person likely to be rearrested? And so you're going to set your AI algorithm, it's got all your inputs and all your weightings, and you're really excited about it. You're going to set it loose now on a data set. That data set is made up of, let's just say, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million data points. That's your data set. Each one of those data points represents an individual decision by an individual judge who came to the table with all of the individual independent decision-making abilities that we talked about a few minutes ago. That's where the data set comes from. It comes from the data points. All right, so let's just move through some of this quickly because we've talked about a lot of this. So AI uses these data sets. I'll ask you whether or not justice is objective and what kinds of philosophies the judges have that are coming up with the underlying decisions in the data points that the AI is now using to make its decision. Does AI have a sentencing philosophy? Do the judges? Is their philosophy the same? Mine, I had a lot of retribution. I also had a lot of rehabilitation. I know some judges who were more rehabilitation than retribution. How about incapacitation? For me, there were some criminals where I believed incapacitation was the main thing, and it dictated how long I believed somebody should go away for. Others would come out with a different determination. And is justice ultimately the same as fairness? So let's go on to, actually, I want to go to page 30. Let's look at where you can locate the concept of justice within AI, okay? First of all, some people say AI does not actually have ethical frameworks or value systems in it. None, they don't exist. All decisions are only based on full information, right or wrong. They stop when they think about facial recognition and voice recognition. And I say, what about when AI is using decision points that are based on discretion? Then we go on to 2 other ways that AI can actually embed value systems and ethical frameworks. 1, within the data points. People are talking a lot right now about bias in data sets. I would say go lower, go to the data points, because it's those data points that are actually pulling up the individual decision making by individual judges, and they therefore get embedded within the data set. Or another way is built into the algorithm by the human designer through their version of the inputs, through their version of the weightings and adjustments, and their design of the output. Output is the goal, the decision. If you're told with the algorithm, build me the algorithm that will come up with a prediction of the best sentence to come up with rehabilitation. I want the sentence that's going to look at the inputs that is best designed for rehabilitation. That is a different algorithm than the one for retribution. And so you've got to think about who's designing. All right, so we're going to use liberty decisions as an example. I've talked about a lot of this: predicting levels of violence, predicting recidivism, predicting the likelihood of compliance. That's how this is being done today. It's being done right now. There's many companies that are actually doing this. Compass is one of them. And do we even know how it works is ultimately the big question. So these are the kinds of inputs that can be used. There are others. But think of all of these. These are the inputs being used in the algorithm today that has been developed and is being utilized across the country in the Compass software. Okay, all of these things. Now, that's one thing you may say, well, that's obvious. There's no magic to that. Well, what if you left off drug use? What if you decided you would leave off marital status? Who's deciding what to include, for crying out loud? The AI does some of that through pattern recognition, but it can be adjusted. How about the weightings? And again, the data sets. How is all of that being decided? Now, there's another piece, which is bail determinations aren't, and sentencing is not just based upon those factors. Judges also weigh the seriousness of the offense, the nature of the conduct. Is mine the same as yours? Maybe, really, maybe not. You know, people come to the table with different kinds of frameworks for all of that. Okay. Let's go to, let me go back to here. All right. Now, there are some additional considerations. Judges also will weigh, when they're trying to figure out whether to let somebody go or not, the importance of family, whether or not family is important, or employment prospects, or whether or not a new baby is in the home, or whether or not treatment should be better obtained outside versus inside. How is the AI going to be actually taking all of that into consideration? Some of it can be key through pattern recognition, but pattern recognition is the aggregation of data points. And data points, as we've said, pulls up underlying decision making that is actually then gets embedded into the AI itself. So our question again becomes, with all of this, when we're adjusting some of the pattern recognition through adjustments that humans can do we know who's making these decisions? There was an example of this in the Loomis case, which is a real case in Wisconsin. And in that case, a defendant was sentenced with a software from Compass called the Compass software, and he said, hey, the judge says he's used this Compass software, and the software predicts that I'm going to have a relatively high level of recidivism, and he's added a couple years to my sentence. I want to know what's in the software. And the judge said, no, I've got a nice pamphlet for you that I got from the company that made this, and it explains everything you'll need to know. And it'll tell you a few of the inputs, and it describes that there might be some weightings and all of that. It doesn't tell you what any of it is. Tells you a few of the high-level things. And that's good enough for me, it's good enough for you. They got raised to the highest court and denied the challenge, the due process challenge. Raised to the highest court, and the highest court in Wisconsin said no due process challenge. Now, frankly, I would disagree. There are cases percolating up all over the country right now on very similar issue. So did the AI make the right decision here? Now, we're going to go to the other piece that I'd said there were 3 pieces. One is the data points. Here's another one, that the designer did it, that somehow the designer is the only one. Well, Utilitarianism and legal positivism are two things to sort of keep in mind. The way in which AI works, it's very good at adding things up and putting them on one side of the ledger or the other side of the ledger. And that corresponds best with a philosophical concept of utilitarianism. And if we just default to that, you can ask yourself, do you live today in a way in which your decision making is based upon a utilitarian way of thinking? Typically, no, right? That would take sort of, you add up the good and you add up the bad, and you don't really care so long as you end up better on the side of the good than the side of the bad. You don't care if some of the bad is stuff that you wish hadn't happened, but you got to just let it go. So for instance, you arrest everybody between the ages of 18 and 25 to reduce the crime rate, because you will surely reduce the crime rate if you arrest everybody between the ages of 18 and 25. That's utilitarian. That had been rejected hundreds of years ago. All right? And we don't do that anymore. And so, in legal positivism, AI is very good at learning to read things and apply them literally. Some people might like that. If you believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, that might actually be what you would like. But there are others who say, no, that's not what I believe in. And so you've got to ask yourself, again, what is it that we want the designer to do? Lastly, I told you I would talk about AI when it becomes and is becoming the ultimate decider, which is as an executioner. We now increasingly use AI as a military tool with its objectives today to identify imminent violent acts. Now, I would ask you, does human decision-making actually involve any discretion when we're identifying imminent violent acts? And what's the kind of judgment that's involved? How about the predictions of identities and locations of bad doers, the predictions of proximity of an event, the ability to find and target? And remember, today what we understand about AI is not what we're going to be able to understand about AI tomorrow. We're losing control of our ability to actually understand it. So as with all of the other decisions that we've talked about this evening, we need to ensure that AI is not today imposing its own version of justice or one that we don't understand, and that tomorrow we understand and that we choose the version of justice that we want AI to make decisions based upon. All right, that was a lot. Want me to do it again? I can do it all again. I can just do slide like 27 again. All right, thank you. Thank you.
So we will now have some time for questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and Lale or I will bring the mic to you. Please do stand up when you ask your question. Try to keep them brief, and as always, priority will go to students.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. My question is, given that there is no perfect data set, and most data sets, especially within the criminal justice system, the past ones are extremely biased, what reforms would you suggest to solve this issue and to reduce bias?
All right, that's a very good question. Like, what are we going to actually do? I think we need to have something like the U.S. Sentencing Commission, essentially, sort of a national conversation, which was with essentially our Congress and legislature, who are our elected representatives, need to get together and to figure out how we're going to regulate some form of sort of data set determination. And it will have to be probably with groups of data sets that are agreed in a entirely non-perfect way, and will take into account or not take into account certain kinds of characteristics, and certain kinds of weightings will or will not be allowed. And so I think it's incredibly hard. I think it's not happening today. And I think that, like, for instance, I didn't pause on it, but the data sets that are used in New York City today are based upon what's happened in New York City recently, the arrest data. Arrest data in New York City will capture stop and frisk arrests, right? There's a big debate about whether or not stop and frisk resulted in the over-arrest of minorities. Some people would say it did, and they feel very, very strongly that it did result in the over-arrest. And some say, no, it didn't. It actually reduced crime and did not result in any over-arrest. But the data set, if you believe it resulted in the over-arrest of minorities, the data set is going to be infirm. You cannot then use that data set as a normative data set. So you've got to find an alternative data set. Now, how do you do that for all of New York City when you take out an entire, almost a decade? So it becomes very, very complicated. Now, there'll be certain ways of taking a data set, that same data set, and reducing things like you take race out as a characteristic. You say to the AI, you are not allowed to pay attention to race. Well, you've also then got to take zip code out, right? Because when you're dealing with a community where you've got when you've got populations which are segregated into certain zip codes, by using zip code as a proxy, you're running into the same problem. So you've got to have a group of people who sit back with probably social scientists who are there with real, thoughtful research, who are somehow democratically, elected to do this, who assist us with this process. It's imperfect. It'll have to be done iteratively, but it can't just be happening randomly, and that's what we've got now. How are you guys going to do this? I'm just going to call on people, but you've got obviously a better system.
Thank you for your talk. So my question is, I think AI creates this very unique opportunity to standardize the implementation of justice. So in the future, do you see maybe a system, perhaps a fairer system, where we remove the human element of the justice system?
Okay, so one of the big potential benefits of AI is to be the world's best system for completely revamping our criminal justice system. You could potentially, theoretically, reduce differentials between judges. You could take the vast disparities in sentencing between judges and actually reduce them. You could actually reduce gross decision-making. When I say gross, I don't mean like bad. I mean large variations in decision-making between judges of what's right and what's wrong. And you could actually then do housing determinations are done by AI today. A lot of housing determinations are being done through the Bureau of Prisons. And so you could actually rationalize all of that in a consistent way. You could. I ask you whether or not you believe in this country today we could all get together and agree that my New York City-based view of what we should do for criminal justice is yours. Because some of you will agree with me and you'll be, all right, let's go, sister. And some of you are going to be, oh my God, we have let the lunatics, like free in the asylum. No way. So the problem is, it can do one thing and rationalize it and have us like an autocracy. All of us have the same criminal justice. It can absolutely do that, but whose? So it's got the potential to reduce differentials in a way that nothing else has, and that could be an enormous benefit if we could do it right. And cracking the code of how to do it right, I'm not sure. It's some version of taking a national body with representatives who are regionally based and drawn from different parts of the country and represent different community standards and putting that together. But it's not random private companies just deciding that this looks really great. And they've got somebody with drinking Mountain Dew in their mother's basement is picking out like what inputs to go in there and what weightings to do. This makes no sense. Okay, there's a question way back there, or over here too.
Oh, yes, hi, sorry. Yeah, I sort of have a related question to that. Just given everything that you've said, it seems very easy to be just like talked out of the idea of even using AI in the judiciary system in general. Do you believe that it's still something that we should pursue because it does have the possibilities of becoming so much better and perhaps making better decisions than us humans could make? Or should we pursue maybe just coming together as a country more like human-wise rather than going with the AI?
Well, I definitely believe in coming together human-wise. I'm like a big humanist, but I think it's beyond, I think it's left. The horse is, what do they say? The horse has left the stable. It is gone. Like the fire is already, you're trying to shut the door after the horse is bolted or whatever these little metaphors are. It's done. It's everywhere, okay? They're using AI. You're not going to go back. We can't go backwards. And there are so many countries around this world that are ahead of us and that are using it, and we've got to keep on developing it. And our focus, first and foremost, ought to be able to look at questions that people aren't asking and not get scared by them, but to say, oh my goodness, what's happening? We're talking about bias in algorithms. We're talking about bias in inputs and weightings. That's not new. What's new is understanding that the decision points that are underlying the data sets, not just the data sets, but the decision points underlying the data sets, those reflect various kinds of judicial frameworks. And that has to be a conversation that we have, but we're not going to get away from it. So my urging is acknowledge it, let's just stand there and take it, and let's just go ahead and move on with the conversation. So I don't think we can go back.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. So I'm an undergrad here, and I've already started doing AI tests as part of the job recruiting process, and I've taken dozens of them, and it basically spits out an output that tells me what kind of employee that I would potentially be at their company. And looking at that data, I find it interesting because sometimes I don't even agree with it myself. And I wonder, what is your opinion on this? Do you see AI as being part of an algorithm for college admissions processes as well as job recruiting processes as a normalized thing in the future?
Okay, I would say it is actually deployed widely in corporations all over the country. So one of the things that you will do when you talk to companies all over the place, every major company that's got employees of over a couple of thousand, not every major company, over 10,000, let's just say, uses AI already. It's used widely in the human resources area. And the big issue is discrimination, because if you're looking for a successful employee and your data set is all men and you now have women who are applying, and it wasn't all men necessarily because of discrimination. Maybe it was all men just because that's who chose to get in. You can debate all those things. The reality is that was the data set, and so you're looking for the successful employee and it doesn't come up with your characteristics. Okay, there's a problem there. We're going to have to start adjusting things. So it's already there. And it's already being used to identify keywords in resumes. It's already being used to identify holes in resume. So if you've got something in your resume that's got a gap of a few years, that's being picked up by algorithms today and you're being put in a different pile. There are now software programs that will help you, and you can Google this tonight if you're interested, that will help you come up with the words that you can put into your resume that will help you overcome the algorithm, okay? But you're going to have to stay one step ahead of the algorithm. So it's already there. That's what I mean. It's not any longer that this is sort of sci-fi or it's being used only a little bit. It's being used really sort of rampantly. So I wish you luck. Look at those programs on the how to overcome it. It'll tell you what words to put in. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I'm actually a philosophy, politics, and economics major, currently writing a thesis on privacy in the law, so this is right up my alley. You're like my icon, so thank you. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on a discrepancy that some people see between the law catching up to technology, if you think the Supreme Court has enough precedent to principally decide a case using these kind of algorithms, using kind of facial recognition technology. Basically, is the law enough to decide these kinds of things?
Well, it's an interesting question. So far, the law has been remarkably flexible with coming out eventually right. Sometimes it's not necessarily right the first time around, but it can be right the second or the third time around, and it does tend to get there. It's one of the really extraordinary things about the American common law system. So I actually have a fair amount of faith that the legal system is going to be able to get there when the right challenges are posed. I think our bigger challenges right now are policy challenges, and that those will be the challenges that are going to make the bigger impact as opposed to the legal challenges. A lot of the legal challenges are on things like algorithms and discrimination. Judges know how to deal with discrimination. If you've got an algorithm then you're able to decipher it, okay? It's not a black box algorithm, and it says that a successful employee is going to be white, male, 40 years old, and that's what they're doing to identify all of the successful employees. The judge is highly likely to say that may discriminate, okay? They know how to do that. First of all, what's going to happen eventually is they're going to lose the ability to understand the algorithm to the extent that we even can now. That's happening. But the judges will know how to do that because they'll translate it into words that they understand. The privacy issues are much more complicated because the privacy issues, and that's your thesis, Europe is frankly ahead of us on some of the privacy issues and the right to be forgotten and the utilization. We were talking about it at dinner earlier tonight with the table up here. But the utilization of private information in the data sets is a very complicated issue where I think the United States is a little bit behind. Hi.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. I have a question about the nods that you made throughout the talk to problems with the universality of applying one designer's judgment to different communities. I'm wondering whether you think that issue is just one of implementation, that people back home, for me in Ohio, would never agree to your New York sense of values in judgment, or whether you actually substantively and inherently think justice is different in some places than others, and it's appropriate for different communities to be evaluated by different standards which are themselves correct and might be incorrect if applied in a different part of the world.
I think that one of the things that we have that we believe very strongly in is a jury of peers. And that the jury by your peers is a regional jury. It's a jury that's relatively localized. We don't have people report for jury service from areas way outside of our home area. And that's for important reasons, because things do differ by local communities. And that's what America is based upon, our differences. It also is one of our great strengths. And so I don't believe that there's one theory of justice or one type of justice that I could ever impose on people in this room from diverse parts of this country or diverse parts of the state. I think that there are representatives who have made different state laws, and those different state laws which emphasize and de-emphasize certain things and give different kinds of penalties for certain things, those different state laws have to be respected. How a crime is treated in Alabama versus how a crime is going to be treated in Georgia or North Carolina or New York or Maryland or Delaware, those are all, they're different. There might be some slight differences. There might be a lot of commonality, a huge amount of commonality. But the differences have to be respected because they come from the elected representatives. And we are not just one government. We are a group of individual states that come together with a federal government on top. And so I don't think it's just a matter of implementation. I think that there are some substantive differences, and I think that's what makes this so hard.
Hello, thank you so much for your talk. So my question relates more to how you talk a lot about how AI systems learn a lot from the data sets. And I guess I'm wondering if you think we're actually might be a bit ahead of our time and we should resolve some of the issues that we have in our society first and then use new data sets or allow for longer periods of time to happen before we can use data sets and apply those to algorithms so they can learn more effectively what we want them to do.
Okay, I love that question because one of the thoughts that I have about how we could solve this is coming up with essentially hypothetical data, right? Idealized data. And it is possible that one could idealize a data set and you could come up with what would be idealized data points that you could then feed up. And that could then bring you to a point where you could actually then have AI making decisions based upon an idealized, hypothesized data set. And then you have other data that then builds on that, that is sort of more along the lines of what we want ultimately, right? I think that would be an ultimate thing. I don't know how we ever get there. But we could start small and build bigger. So for instance, you could start in a company by saying, our idealized employee is not going to be our data set. We're going to set the AI loose on a different kind of data set that we're going to actually put together over here according to the following standards. And you could have corporate America could actually come up. It'd be very expensive to do this, right? Incredibly expensive. And by the way, you'd have to have lawyers all over it, crawling all over it to make sure you didn't get it wrong, right? Otherwise, it's a disaster. And but you could do that. And you can't just stop using AI. That's not going to happen. So you've got to think of some interim, I think, steps. Is there one over there?
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I just had a question how you were saying how the law is something that is so flexible and being perfected over time. And with AI coming into question with this, how do you think we protect the individuals from becoming like trial and error pieces in developing AI law? How do we protect the people whose cases are being tried at a time where AI is still under construction almost?
Yeah, I don't think we do. I don't think we can, right? But I'll give you some comfort in a even sort of more maybe upsetting fact, which is that you have new judges all the time who don't know what they're doing, really. And when I became a new judge, I didn't have any criminal experience, right? I spent a lot of time learning a lot, and I took very, very seriously reading everything I could on what other judges in my district did. We had a very serious training program. The other judges really took us under their wings. They were really incredible about it. And you made decisions much more slowly as a new judge, and you really talked to people about them a lot to try to make sure you get it right, right? So you're not just putting out decisions without knowing what you're doing. You're trying to learn, but you're learning. And you do grow more sophisticated over time. I was talking to some judges about how they grow more lenient over time. And so I think that human beings also make decisions that change. That's my point, which is we are at a moment in time when AI is sort of going through some growth process and maybe not getting things just right. But if we realize that we're also imperfect human beings, it may disturb us a little bit less, but boy, you wouldn't want to be the person who, the New York Times just ran an article a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, last week, right, about this guy who had a determination about his release conditions based upon an algorithm who told him the frequency with which he was supposed to report. And nobody could really explain to him why. And it was because he was considered to be a high risk. And so, you know, he's dealing with that. And that's happening all the time. So we do have some breakage, but I don't think anybody's going to stop using it. New York State uses it. The software that New York State uses has been tested, and it's got a very high degree of accuracy, but it has a percentage of inaccuracy. You don't want to be in that percentage, right? Somebody's in that percentage.
If I'm allowed to ask another question, but here I am. So I had two sort of related questions. So the first is if you think judges have a responsibility to understand how this AI is working. I know you mentioned that there's a point in which nobody understands what's happening and that some things can be simplified so the judges can understand. But you gave the story about how the judge gave the pamphlet and was like, this is good enough for me, this is good enough for you. Shouldn't they have a responsibility to really understand what's going into these algorithms? And secondly, do those whose fate is being decided by these algorithms, should they also have a right to understand what's going in and what percentages and things like that?
Yes. So one of the things that I did last summer was I gave 3 lectures in the summer that had to be exactly the same. That was my instruction to all of the judges in New York, and then I gave one in the fall, and I'm giving one to all the appellate judges next summer on the question of how to identify bias in algorithms, how to take seriously issues with algorithmic bias, and how to ask questions. One of the things that we really need to do is make sure that judges understand what the words are that they should be looking for, what the questions are that they should be asking, that they're going to be able to get sufficient resources to have experts come in and explain this to them. We were talking about at dinner about how I believe that defendants have a due process right to understand as much as possible about the algorithm. Now again, the algorithms are getting out of our control. They're turning into, some of them are into black box algorithms where really nobody understands them. But to the extent that we can, we're going to have to pay like we pay for right to counsel. We're going to have to pay for a right for the defendants to have access to somebody who can actually explain the algorithm to them. And if we can't, then maybe not use that particular algorithm and go back to an algorithm that is understandable. But I believe that you're absolutely right, that we should not have liberty decisions, the most important decisions that are made in the criminal justice system, liberty-based decisions being made when we don't understand them. One of the requirements for any judge is to actually pronounce out loud in open court the basis for his or her decision as to a liberty determination. It's required. We have to do it. We have to say why, because people are entitled to hear why. They're entitled to challenge why. They're entitled to appeal the why. And the same thing is true then for the algorithm. You can't have that somehow be excluded from the why.
Thank you so much for your talk. I think expanding a little bit on that, as we start to kind of trust AI's judgment more and more on these cases, will we start to see fewer and fewer appeals and maybe a little bit of a weakening of the judiciary branch's ability to interpret laws? And will we see maybe a little bit of a shift in terms of that?
You know, I wonder about that, whether or not there will be maybe not fewer appeals at first, but fewer reversals of appeals, because you have certain kinds of decisions where there's a segment of it which is being made by a machine. I'll tell you, in China right now, where they've actually, I just did an article on holographic judges. They've got these holographic judges in China that are really neat. There's like an amalgamation of a judge. It's like different people all put together, and like you stand there and it's like a holograph, and they answer questions and conduct trials and do all kinds of things, right? And give verdicts, and it exists today. It's happening today, right? I mean, who knew? And but the appeal rate is very low. I guess at the point that you're facing a holographic judge, you think the game is up, right? Like you've got bigger things to worry about. And but I wonder whether or not, there's certain decisions I think that judges need to continue to make. They certainly need to continue to have oversight. It's certainly their responsibility. The ultimate responsibility for any liberty decision is a judge's decision, not any machine's. And the judges, I believe, take that very, very seriously. But I do think that there will be an overall impact on any area where AI is making such inroads. We've talked about criminal justice tonight. This is just an example. There are lots of places where discretionary human decision-making is implicated, where there are embedded value systems and embedded frameworks of ethics underneath the decision-making. In the back, in the way back.
Hi there, thank you for your talk. On a slightly different note, and on the slide that's up right now, there are currently autonomous weapon systems in use by multiple foreign governments, including Israel and Russia. What do you think should be the role of the United States military in combating that? Should we also be trying to develop autonomous weapon systems, or should we adopt this kind of cautious approach to AI and ethics, which would put us kind of behind in that race for AI weaponry?
Let me ask you a question. Why do you think we're not?
Oh, we very much are.
Right, we are. So I don't think we're as far behind the other countries as we may think. We're not as necessarily as public about it because we don't really have to compete in an asymmetric way, which is also through the release of information. We can actually just do it through the actual gadgets themselves. But this is happening, right? But we ultimately, just like with judicial decision making, ultimately today there is still a judge involved. We haven't eliminated with judges in America. We also have not eliminated the human ultimate person responsible in some of the autonomous weapons decisions. But the algorithms are increasingly hard to decipher, and they're very sophisticated and increasingly hard to figure out why certain decisions are being made, and it becomes a yes-no, and in very limited time. The issue with the autonomous weapons is the problem of being wrong by the human decision maker on both sides. If you're wrong and somebody then launches an imminent attack, that's a terrible thing. If you're wrong and you've now executed somebody or assassinated them or just killed them, whatever word you want to choose that's appropriate to your value system, then you can, then that actually is also a sort of a problem. So you've got a huge problem that's immediate. It's one or the other. And the time in which you've got to make that decision as to whether to override the AI or not is incredibly short. So you don't have a lot of investigatory, okay, they've decided to weigh the fact that this person was wearing head garb of a particular, that looked in a particular way, to weigh that more heavily than something else. They've got this group of people who are gathered together and they've decided to sort of reduce the weighting on social gatherings and increase weighting on the likelihood of it being a group of bad actors. And so the ability to actually decipher how the weightings are occurring and what the inputs are is, you really don't have time. That's one of the big problems.
Hello, so we've talked about AI and the criminal courts. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about AI in the civil courts. Do you think that it could potentially lower the cost of bringing civil actions, and that AI arbitration could be something in the future that is effective at bringing justice?
Yes. So Estonia right now has actually announced that they're going to be doing small claims with AI. And I think that one of the places where AI actually has the ability to do a lot very quickly and very well is in the civil realm, because there are a lot of things that are frankly relatively cookie cutter. in the civil realm. And frankly, also, we're willing to make more mistakes. And so I think that the ability to actually, sometimes justice delayed is justice denied. So sometimes a quick decision is a really important decision. So, and there's a lot of routine decisions that are very routine. You know, you can feed in certain fact patterns that sort of get spit out in a particular way. And so I think AI has the ability to do that. Now in China, the same holographic virtual judges I was talking about do a lot of online mediations 24 hours a day. You can have your online mediation. Look it up. It's there right now. They got a couple of great white papers, very interesting, with their statistics. And so it's actually being done in China right now. I think it'll be done in the United States through some versions of that in the next, I don't know, decade or so, where you'll be able to choose or not choose into one of those systems. But I think it's got great potential in the civil realm.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. So in the next election, Californians will have the ability to vote on whether they should eliminate cash bail with a risk-based algorithm in an attempt to reduce bias. And so I was wondering, although this is kind of an inevitable path we're going on, do you think that as it is now, people should vote in favor of this algorithm, hoping that it will change, or keep the current system and wait for the algorithm to improve?
You know, I would want to know a lot about the algorithm. As you can tell, I don't know. There's a lot of debate in this country right now about cash-based bail and the problems that that creates for indigent populations, et cetera, et cetera. And so those are very important debates to be having. And if there is an algorithm that actually has been shown to be less biased than in some way that people have decided through their elected representatives has been proven to them to their satisfaction, then I would think that that would be a good thing if they proved it, right? But I would want to know personally who designed the algorithm. Tell me more about that. Tell me what data set it's working off of. Is it working off of a California algorithm? Is it working off of a California data set? What year? You know, is that a 5-year-old data set? Are they going to be updating it to tell me about whether or not it includes all the cannabis, all of the cannabis arrests? Because now cannabis has been decriminalized in a lot of areas for certain kinds of uses. And so if all those arrests are being counted, maybe you want those eliminated. Have they programmed it to eliminate all the cannabis arrests? So you want to find out more than just knowing that there's an algorithm that reduces bias, because that, I'll tell you, is incredibly dangerous, because maybe not. It might, for some people, reduce bias, but it might not for other people. And so it really depends. But the concept is a good concept. The concept of the ability that one day you could design, and it sounds so negative, this talk, right? It really, I actually believe that there's a way of getting this right. I just think it takes an awful lot of work. And that we can have real criminal justice reform with this if we actually do it right. So I think that that would be one way of getting criminal justice reform. But my goodness, ask questions. Don't just check yes.
And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions this evening. So please join me in thanking Ms. Forrest.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.